everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch Project, the first and only program which is dedicated exclusively to those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Welcome to the Fourth Branch Program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and you are on the Fourth Branch Program. Ignorance has never been touted as a virtue. In fact, Plato, a Greek philosopher in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Ignorance cripples democracy and keeps generations in bondage. Ignorance is not personal nor private. It places a very heavy burden on family members and is useless to society. Martin Luther King said that nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance. And John F. Kennedy said that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all. And yet, for reasons that are beyond understanding, for reasons that defy logic, Republican leaders in Washington have relied exclusively on the ignorance of their constituent to keep their job, to advance agenda which are more or less destructive, useless, unprofitable to the country. It is indeed a crisis in America that most Republicans, constituent exclusively, are gullible and naive, and they believe what the Republican leaders tell them, no matter how blatantly false it is. Republican leaders in general have been masters of deception for quite some time now. And in 2016, they have finally met the leaders of deception in the President of the United States, who has adopted one of the most used destructive approach to governing, to lie. The only other individual who has done the same in the history is Adolf Hitler. He even used it as a way to advance something that is totally false, to make people believe it is true. In fact, it was Adolf Hitler that says, make the lie big, say it often enough, and it will be believed. America is in a serious crisis. Unless this process, this approach by the Republican leaders is reversed, future generation will wake up in a country that doesn't offer the same opportunities, that does not provide the type of freedom that we have all enjoyed for 2.5 centuries. So when I say the country is in a serious crisis, this is not an exaggeration. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. On the menu today, we're going to take a look at the GOP core values, and we will also continue the conversation on race relation in America. And we make a very small twist in the way we approach democracy in America today to give you kind of a peek as to why the GOP has moved so far away from what they call their core values. And of course, we started the conversation yesterday about slave trades, the rebellion. And we will continue to provide enough material to help understand why racism, discrimination is still rampant in the United States of America. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a new topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. One, to bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discriminations, and racism in the country. Two, to expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. Three, to extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we, as a society, be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. War on blacks. Here in the United States, since the existence of the country, there has been a war on blacks. It started before this country was even created. White European went to Africa, chased blacks with rifle, killed them, captured those who could not escape, brought them here in the United States, and forced them to slavery. Today, there is what we call institutionalized racism in America. The purpose of this program is not to debate whether there is or there is not. There is. The purpose is not to discuss whether it is practiced by a small group of people or not, because it is widespread. It's everywhere in every corner of our society. What we're here to discuss, rather, is to understand why mid-21st century, almost more than 100 years, century beyond, sorry, excuse me, the emancipation of slaves, and yet racism, discrimination is on the menu every single day for blacks. The difference between racism, if the neighbor next door is racist, I couldn't care less. Because just like it could be a Christian, it could be practicing Buddhism, whatever his preference in life would be, it would not do anything or it would not impact my life. Because that's his God-given right to like or not like someone. But what we are concerned with, and the reason this program, race relation, under the banner War in Black, has become important is because of institutionalized racism in America. Now, racism is just the behavior, the action, the thought of one individual towards another, which is based almost exclusively on external factors such as skin color. That's what racism is. And that's how discrimination is practiced. It based on nothing else but the sheer physical appearance of an individual. In fact, there is a movie where Eddie Murphy dressed like a white individual on a bus, and all the white people were talking bad about blacks. But of course, they didn't know they were talking to a black individual. No, don't have to exaggerate to that how funny it is, because obviously the audience knows that Eddie Murphy is black, but for sake of the comedy itself, all the people talking to him are white. Now, racism is only a problem because it is institutionalized in America. And what does that mean? Well, institutionalized racism is a system which nurtures, condones, or even promotes racist behavior, action, and language. Now, this is where the problem is, because, as mentioned, if my neighbor next door doesn't like blacks, I couldn't care less, and it would not do anything to me. It would not impact my life that he doesn't like blacks. But I get concerned, or blacks should, when you are faced with institutionalized racism. What does that mean? It simply means that no matter where you are, no matter where you go, you as a black person will suffer because of being blacks. You apply for a job, it will be harder to get that job. You want a promotion, it will be harder to get that promotion. You walk down the street, it will be easy for a cop to violate your constitutional rights, and so on and so forth. This is what we call institutionalized racism. And it is promoted, it is condoned, it is nurtured, it is even in the racist behavior, the action, the language, all of that is promoted in an institutionalized racist society. Now, the reason that can happen is because there are millions of whites who are racist and who discriminate. Of course, there are millions of whites who are not racist, who do not discriminate. The problem, however, is because the millions of whites who are racist and who discriminate, they are in various positions of power. They are judges, they are chief of police, commissioner of police, they are mayors, they are governors, they are congressmen, they are senators, president of the United States. Now, the legislators, as I give example before, they pass legislation that which purpose is very detrimental to blacks. And it's not by sheer accident. I gave those examples before, and as we continue the conversation, I will continue to provide those examples, because that's what institutionalized racism is, because everything that congressmen, senators, governors, mayors, president do, they do it to be detrimental to specific groups. That's institutionalized racism, which is different from meeting someone who is racist. And of course, it's a group of people who are racist who are actually making those type of decisions. But if it were just the individual, it would not have mattered. Now, why? And this is the purpose of this program. Why do we have that? We started talking yesterday about slave trades and the beginning of rebellions. Now, although we will address a part of some of the comments that people have been making, especially even blacks who are ignorant of history make the comment, and one person in particular comes to mind, Kanye West, who mentioned that racism or slavery was a choice. Now, from the time blacks were captured, transported here, for those who survived the journey, transported here and enslaved, they never stopped fighting to get out of the predicament. No, they didn't like it, they didn't enjoy it, and they never wanted to stay slaves. In case you have no idea what that means, slaves suffered horrific treatment in the hands of the slave masters, including death, cutting of their limb. They could not possibly enjoy that. Now, there were, from time to time, a few slaves who tried to break free from that predicament. They were not successful. In fact, every time that a slave or a group of slaves tried to escape and fail, it became harder and harder for other slaves to escape. And the reason for that is because now the slave owners tighten the watch and make certain that the slaves were always chained and always guarded. If for some reason they had to remove the chain from a slave to go from point A to point B, that slave would be accompanied by at least 2 armed guards. So the idea that they enjoyed so much, that's why it lasted so long, it's only for the ignorant to make a statement like this. Now, because of that very problem, because of that very fact that every time a slave tried to escape or a group of slaves tried to escape and fail, they will suffer terrible consequences in the hands of slave masters. And because the slave owners, the slave masters, did not have to account to anybody about their property, so beating, starving to death, killing a slave was no big deal. Because although killing a slave is a loss of sort, but if that helps the slave owner instill more fears on the remaining slaves, they would do that. Sometimes they don't kill the slave, or they didn't kill the slave, but rather they would exchange the slave and put the slave someplace else, far away, where the group that that slave belonged to, let's call the slave John. Now John would receive a beating of his life, torture, but would not come back to that place for that slave owner. And of course, they would spread the word that John was killed. That would instill more fear in the remaining slave so that they know they too will suffer the same consequences. So the war on blacks started in Africa, and if they survive, so a number of casualties along the way, even through the journey, and when they came here, they suffer not only physical casualty, emotional casualties, psychological casualties, and the financial part, we don't need to talk about. Blacks did not have own anything. Now, because of the kind of treatment they were put through, no matter how many blacks were either killed or transferred and communicated as dead, blacks would not stop trying to escape, because the treatment was not anything that anyone would want to live and continue to live under. Now, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're watching this for the first time, I strongly suggest you take a look at past presentation, which is stored on the People Branch YouTube channel, where all the previous presentations are archived there under War on Blacks or Race Relation. Now, the more the slave owners instill fear, and the more punishment he inflicted on the slaves, the more incentive the slave had to escape the predicament they were in. And remember, I mentioned yesterday, the first few years of slavery gave some slave, or at least less some slave, with the hope that someday they will be able to see their families. They will be able to reunite with their families. In fact, that was also one of the psychological, emotional casualty that a lot of blacks suffered, because the slave owner kept dangling in front of them the idea that if they do well, if they obey, if they didn't try to do anything wrong, at some point they will have a chance to see their family, which was pure lies, because family were divided, sold in different parts of the world, in different states, in different countries. Yes, the casualties blacks have suffered in the hands of whites are immeasurable. So as time went by, of course, while those blacks didn't have the privilege to go to school, but there is the instinctive knowledge and understanding, intuition in human being that you don't have to go to school for, and you start realizing that was the case. And besides, those individuals lived in the land, and it was their wit that kept them alive, that kept them to do progress as they went along, until the European white came and changed everything. So those black slaves began to realize that nothing is going to change, because this dangling of you're going to see your family, or you're going to have a chance to see your wife, to see your kids, if you obey and you don't try to do anything that's bad. Blacks started to realize that was just lies. If you wonder where Donald Trump get this habit of lying, welcome to lies. Now, as I mentioned, many have tried to escape. They fail. The whites always vigilant, whether the were guards or whether the slave owners themselves, they were vigilant, and they always managed to crush any uprising. In 1800, however, there was a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Prosser, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was his name. 1800, that was in Richmond, Virginia. That was the first successful escape from slavery by an individual. Well, actually not just by an individual, but by a group of individuals. But Gary or Gabriel Prosser. I will bring that next time for to make certain that I'm passing the correct information. It's either Gary or Gabriel Prosser. In Richmond, Virginia, in 1800, he managed to gather a small group of blacks, strategized, and escaped. Needless to tell you what that meant for blacks in general, but for that group in particular. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a new topic added to the fourth branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relations in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discriminations, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we, as a society, be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. The name of the gentleman that managed to escape in 1800 was Gabriel Prosser from Richmond, Virginia. In 1800, he managed to gather a small group of blacks and escape. Now, although a few of them stayed free, but not the whole group managed to stay that way. In fact, some of them were captured, some of them were killed. Because that was the state of affairs. You have to understand the whole South was enslaved, at least for blacks. So there was really absolutely no place that they could hide. So if you escape, you have to at least manage at best as possible to stay out of the spotlight, especially during the day, and try to make your way towards the north at night. That was a very tricky situation because there was absolutely no place that any black could be in the South and be safe, because the whole South had whites in the South. All the whites in the South were concerned because they all had slaves, and they all were also concerned about slave escaping. But not just that, but slave who managed to free themselves not only could escape, but could also do them harm. Now, I have to add one thing to that. Most slaves who tried to escape, they had one goal and one goal in mind: to escape and run towards freedom, which was the North. But make no mistake, if you try to stop that individual who just escaped slavery, even if it were to be just a few minutes that the person had of freedom, now you try to capture that person and put that person back into slavery, you can pretty much rest assured you're going to have a problem in your hand. That's talking about whites who saw blacks escaping from slavery as if they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have done that. And it is a good time to also bring forth that really great irony of whites when they're talking about blacks. They were inflicting those horrific actions on blacks. At the same time, they were going to church claiming love of God. But at home, they were slaving. They were forcing blacks to work 18 hours a day and beat them to death while they pretend to be Christian. That's the greatest irony of the South. Whites who pretend to have this level of morality, and yet their actions, even the devil would cry to see what they did to black people. So that's why blacks in general, they are very skeptical when whites say something. Although we also recognize there are whites who discriminate and there are racists and there are those who do not. But because this is ingrained in our DNA that whites, they, during slavery, they lied to blacks so much that blacks were stigmatized by those lies. Now, when those slaves, led by Gabriel Prosser in 1800, managed to escape, yes, a few of them were caught and killed. But that was not the last time. That wasn't the first time that slaves tried to escape. That was the first time that there was a group that actually had a leader that says, let's do this, I have a plan. At least that's recorded in the annals of history. That's Gabriel Prosser in 1800, after suffering more than a century of slavery, managed to come up with a plan and also managed to convince a few other slaves, we are going to run from slavery. But much unfortunately, they did not succeed. At least not all of them succeeded. So in the group, quite a few of them were killed and a few others were picked up and put back to slavery.
Don't go anywhere. The Fourth Branch program will return in just a moment.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
The GOP core values compromise. Now, if the biggest problem that whenever I speak about the fact that our democracy is in jeopardy, I always get a few pushback from individuals who have different ideas as to what that meant. Now, there is, I can give you an example of which is an example that will not serve well in the discussion, but will help establish the difference between what a value is and whatever else that Republicans think that they have is. Because the very confusion that I always have when I hear Republicans talking about core values, I don't know about whether there was a time these expressions had an importance, but since I have been personally involved in social, political discussion, debate, research, and so on, I have had an extremely difficult time understanding what do Republicans mean by core values. Now, I say that because it is difficult, and it is the discussion itself is important because it helps to understand why the country is in the predicament it is today. Now, for those, I mentioned earlier that Republican constituents are naive, they're gullible. Now, they may say that's not true, but I can give you many examples, and we have plenty of them. In fact, the very reason that Russians, I can give you two examples in that very aspect. If you haven't been watching the news, or you do not care about detail, or you simply discard whatever news that's not beneficial, or that doesn't promote your idea, or that doesn't elevate the individual you think is the greatest thing that has happened since sliced bread, then you may not be aware of the fact that when Russia tried to do harm to America, keep your eyes and your ears wide open, because you may not understand what actually hurt the country is the fact that politicians play politics, which is fair, which is fine. That's who they are. But Republican politicians only resort, or at least for as long as I've been watching and following them, they resort to deception. And we're not talking about light or something subtle. They resort to exclusively to deception. And what makes them successful is the fact that their constituents are naive and gullible. That is a bad combination in any democracy, because you have the politicians who simply look at whatever agenda that benefits them, that they can take advantage of. It doesn't matter what it does to the country. And they have the constituent that they can easily manipulate to accept whatever that they give to that constituent. We have many examples, and one of it is the President of the United States sitting in the Oval Office, who lied every step of the way to the people who supported him, and even up to today continue to lie, and those people still continue to support. Here is my point. Masters of deception for the Republican leaders, and the constituents are gullible and naive. I shouldn't even have to provide any other example, because this example alone should be sufficient to make my point. But I'm going to give you another important point. Even the outside world knows that Republican legislators, they are not as concerned. Now they talk big game. They patriot, they're defenders of the nation, they this and that. And yet, that's the irony of the whole thing. They talk, but their actions are very different from what they say. Now, Russia knew that, and it is even reported by those few Russians that they already captured, including they already interviewed, including that lady that's currently cooperating with the Southern District of New York and with Robert Mueller, Maria Butina, or Butina, I'm not sure. They target Republicans, and there is a reason for that. It's because Republicans are very receptive to anything that benefits them, however, even if that is detrimental to the country. Even the Russians figure that much out. They could have approached the Democrat, but they figured it's not going to be as easy for them, because Democrat would not go along with their plan. Now, as much as Republicans want to claim they patriot, but at the slightest possibility that what proposed to them will benefit them, hey, who cares about patriotism? And this is the biggest problem to our democracy, because you have leaders, if we can call those Republican senator, congressmen as such, because a leader is really someone who has a much higher level of morality and who can lead their constituent to improve the constituent lives, and at that help elevate the country. But as we saw, Donald Trump is not the only problem that we have, and that hurting our democracy. Because today there is an inclination that everyone is pointing to Donald Trump, as if Donald Trump is causing what we see in this country. Donald Trump is simply a symptom of the Republican Party. He's another good example. Donald Trump would have ever decided to run as a Democrat, and that's a guarantee he would not have succeeded, because Democrats would not have embraced him as the Republicans did. So the Republicans speak big game. They're defenders. In fact, in order to understand, I actually talked to a Republican and he gave me this list. It's not an exhaustive list, but it gives me an idea as to what Republicans consider their core value. They consider smaller government. You need to laugh when you hear that. They very for lower taxes. And the question I have is, lower taxes for whom? And they want greater personal responsibility, which is very ironic because the very people that are preaching personal responsibility now, as legislator, who's supposed to have even higher responsibility, much bigger responsibility, they are the one that actually clearly show they couldn't care less about responsibility for the country. They want elimination of wealth transfer. What that means in English is the idea when you hear tax the rich more so that we can have more to help those in need. That's what they mean. Don't take money from the rich to give to those in need, but the other way around is okay. In fact, this is not just a statement. The $1.5 trillion tax cut is exactly that. The country borrowed $1.5 trillion, gave $1.3 trillion to corporation and wealthy individual, which means the people only got 0.2. And guess what? We, the people, are responsible for the whole part. So the idea of no health transfer is meaning do not take from the rich to give to the poor, but take from the poor and give to the rich. So they didn't say that part too well. But that's the kind of thing we call it soundbite that unfortunately Republican constituents are gullible and naive. They believe those things when in fact none of those things that supposedly core values is any of the thing that's done in the Republican circle. They want high, listen to this, that's another bulleted point in the core value, high moral and ethical standard. Can you believe that you hearing that Republican wants high moral and ethical standard? Look at the individual in the Oval Office that everybody is supporting, protecting, defending. Core values. They want a government that does not pick winners and losers. What I'm trying to say is, in case this whole conversation escapes you, is Republican leaders, if we can call them that, because since I have no other way of calling those people, those congressmen, senators, governors, and so on, then we'll continue to call them leaders. But for all purpose of this conversation, those are not leaders because they're not leading, doing anything. So the idea of core values, what Republicans call core values, no Republican is living it. Is living the life that shows that they not just saying that, because just saying that you are a Christian doesn't do anything, because anybody can say that. The devil can claim to be a Christian. And that's what Republicans rely exclusively on. So they are masters of deception. When Russia wanted to hurt America, Russia went to the Republicans. Exclusively to the Republicans. So everyone that's watching the country knows that it's easy to get to the Republican because they are less concerned about the country. They use word as a cover, as if, oh gee, we're not going to do bad things. And yet, at all aspects of their lives, that's all they do. In a sense, Republicans are very responsible for the jeopardy our democracy faces today. And as I give you as example, those are not just my own words. Those are information readily available for anybody to see. That Russia went to the Republican and say, I can help you. Now, we all believe that Donald Trump, of course, he's in the center of the whole scandal, but we all believe that Donald Trump was it. That was Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone. But we are now learning that's not the case at all. A lot of Republican leaders were involved with Russia. Now, for the few Republicans, now those people, I keep calling them Republicans, but really the real name for those individuals are Trumpublicans. Now, the few Republicans who already separate themselves from Donald Trump, from those Republicans who have sold the country, they are well aware of the problem the party had. In fact, they also very inclined to blame Donald Trump for the predicament the party is in. But I keep saying to everyone that I have a chance to converse with, Republican that is, Donald Trump did not do anything to the Republican Party. What Donald Trump did was to help expose who the Republicans are. That's all that Donald Trump did. It did not turn anyone, legislators or constituent, it did not help turn. Donald Trump could not have everyone in a matter of a few months of campaign convert all those people and turn them into what we've been seeing for the past 2 years. Nobody could do that. Not even Jesus could. So no, Donald Trump did not turn the Republican Party into what it is today. Donald Trump did, however, help to expose the Republicans for who they really are. They talk about love for the country, but they sell the country in a heartbeat. If that helps them to keep their job as senator, as congressman, or to advance whatever agenda that they have, they couldn't care less. They just sell the country. But they tell you they patriot. Because to them, patriot is when you stand during the national anthem and put your hands on your chest and you are patriot. But as far as they're concerned, Russian, whether it's people from the Middle East, if you offer them help and that help put either money in their pocket or help them advance their political career, they just don't care about the country. As such, Trumpublicans have put our democracy in serious jeopardy. Now, you may get instant satisfaction and you feel, oh, that's great. Republicans are in control. In control to do what? How are they helping? Now, you may argue the case that you're not gullible if you are a Republican, you're not naive, but I already gave you several examples of such that even in the social media world, the hackers did an excellent job on the Republicans. Every lie that they put out there, the Republicans just ate it up. Why were they not so successful with Democrats? because Democrats are not as naive. They're not as gullible. I've already had 5 or 6 episodes of showing that Republicans are dumber than Democrats, no matter what level of education that they have. And quite a few Republicans have pushed back and think that's not so. But it's proven time and again that they are gullible and they are naive. As such, they are exposure. Now today, Donald Trump is claiming that we have a problem on the southern border. The real problem we have is right here in the United States of America. Donald Trump is a major problem for the country. And the Republican constituent and the Republican leaders whose job was supposed to strike a balance and help the country stay afloat and balance, they also are helping to bring the country down. And we know that because during the whole 2016 presidential election, there are quite a few of them that came out and speak out. But today they all rally behind Donald Trump destroying the very fabric of our democracy. Now I'm going to play for you, not completely, but I'm going to cue and have play for you the 3 separate video to show you that there was a time that Republicans did clearly see that Donald Trump was going to be the greatest threat to our democracy, and they spoke out. But today, what has changed? Let's take a look.
I'll tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth. And in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook.
I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office. And I'm a Republican and he's not. He's not a conservative.
We're not going to turn over the conservative movement to a con artist who was telling people one thing but has spent 40 years sticking it to working Americans and now claims to be their champion. We are not going to turn over the conservative movement to a con artist who was telling people one thing but has spent 40 years sticking it to working Americans and now claims to be their champion.
What if hip-hop never existed?
What happened? At the time those individuals that you just saw made those statements, Donald Trump had gotten worse in office. And yet, those same individuals have rallied behind him to support his action, which are detrimental for the country. So they cannot say Donald Trump has improved because he has not. If anything, it had gotten worse. So the idea that Republicans stand for something as core values, I would like to understand what exactly they mean by core values. What are those core values? It is totally ironic that you have Lindsey Graham, I remember very clearly, gave a speech on the Senate floor talking about Bill Clinton, immorality. And he said that he would not lose any sleep to vote to impeach Bill Clinton. And here we are today. So we know Republicans speak a lot. They talk a lot. They say a lot of things. but none of them has any value. Now, Republican constituents, they're gullible, they're naive. Remember during Obama tenure, there were 53% of Republicans who believed he was not an American citizen. Now, I'm giving you this example because when the argument made that they're not gullible, then how do you explain that you have, especially in this day and age, where the internet information are available everywhere, and yet you still manage to have more than half of a political party so gullible that they believe a lie that was being promoted. Now, here's another lie that has been promoted not just during the Obama tenure, but a lie that's been promoted for the longest is about healthcare. Now, sometimes I try to understand as to what kind of logic is used when Republicans are trying to look at a piece of information. Because logic is not a Democrat or a Republican thing. Logic is logic. You cannot change that. If I say that to an individual that you will die someday, now you may not like it, and if I go back and explain why I said that, I said, well, because you are humans and all men are mortal. That is logical. Now, you may not like my conclusion because you don't want to die, but it's irrelevant because it is logical that you are a man, you will die. And that's what logic is. You cannot argue with logic. You can reject it because you don't like it. There is absolutely nothing that anyone can do for you. Republican leaders, they rely, exclusively on the gullibility and the naiveness of the constituent in order to get anything done. It's not politics. They have to deceive their constituent. That's what they rely on. You don't believe me? You don't have to. Go and look at everything that the Republican congressmen, senators have said to you and see. I can take a very recent example with you. The $1.5 trillion tax cut. I remember very clearly Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, they were all out there promoting the idea that we, the people, are going to get a tax cut. Now, that was a pure lie. And the reason we know it's a pure lie is because $1.3 trillion out of 1.5 will not come to us. So it's not a tax cut for us. That money go to large corporation and wealthy individual. Now the 0.2 trillion that used to divide among all the people. Now some people who see a $50 or $60 increase in their paycheck may say, yay, tax cut. And that's the deception part. Because yes, you get $50, $60 first. It's not permanent. And second, We, the people, owe the whole 1.5 trillion. Yes, you heard correctly. Now, is it a tax cut? Of course not, because you personally may not have to pay for it, but we, the people, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, have to pay for it. So it was never a tax cut for the people. Now, it is a tax cut for the wealthy individual and large corporation because, listen to this, they do not have to return a single penny back. Now, they did receive a tax cut. So why do you think your Republican legislator had to tell you it is a tax cut? They lied to you. They tell you something that they know you're just going to accept as, oh yes, we're going to get a tax cut. They rely exclusively on your gullibility, on your naiveness in order to make something work. They are masters of deception, and that's what represents a grave danger to our democracy. We're not talking about politics here. This is not politics we're talking about. We're talking about deception. Remember how much they were against Obamacare because it's bad for the country. It's going to cost jobs. I mean, a bunch of lies that they know were lies. And the reason we know they know it was lie, guess what? During the 2018 midterm election, guess what they did? They tried to sell you that they're going to preserve Obamacare. So if it was that bad, then why would they all of a sudden they want to keep it? It's because they wanted your vote and they know you, the Republican constituent, are gullible and naive. You'll just buy it. And they rely on that. And that's the way for decades Republicans have been conducting business in Washington. They rely exclusively on the gullibility, the naiveness, and the ignorance of their constituent. I've seen it, I've talked to them, and it is actually sad. It is very sad that people who are flaunting their degree, because usually when I have a conversation with some Republican, they trying to prove that they know dummy, they went to college, they got a master's degree. And that's actually the irony of the whole thing. What good is a master's degree if you cannot reason to see that you're being lied to? Now, here's an interesting example. Obamacare versus emergency care. Now, Republican leaders, those who did not want Obamacare to pass, tell you that we don't want to pay for the health care of other individuals. That's their problem. They don't have a job, they don't have health care, that's their problem. Remember I mentioned logic earlier? Now, those people that tell you that, they rely on your ignorance for your support. That's really what they rely on, your ignorance, that you ignorant enough that you would not be able to understand or to even be able to rationalize to have some level of rationale to understand the difference. Now, let me show you a simple example. Someone who doesn't have health care and you say you're not going to pay for, in fact, you pay for that individual 10,000 times. In fact, you pay more for that individual because when someone who doesn't have health care, something happened to that person physically, health related, the person rushed to the emergency, which may cost 3-10 times more than if that person had health care. Who do you think is going to pay for that? Yes, you may not have wanted that individual to have health care because, oh, I'm not going to pay for that individual. But the cost of emergency care is way more than the cost of helping that person to get health care. But you declare, I'm not going to do that. Socialism. It is one of the most irrational arguments that I heard. And yet, Republican constituents buy it because their leaders say that's the way to go. And that represents the greatest danger to our nation. Ignorance represents the greatest danger that our nation has had to go through. Unfortunately.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
I do thank you for spending the time with me, and I hope those information were somewhat valuable to you. And I hope that I can count on you for the next episode of the Fourth Branch program, which is tomorrow at 2 p.m. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, criticism, suggestions, do not hesitate to contact us to help us improve. If you have a particular topic you would like us to research and talk about, we would be glad to do so. The objective is not political. We do not have any political agenda. However, our goal is to point out the issues that threaten our democracy and the issues that impact our society. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Join me on our next social media broadcast. See you then. The Fourth Branch Podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
ya